All right, was there 6 minutes in the fourth quarter still? This is a bold move, to be perfectly honest. I wanted to start the podcast a little early in honor of you because you've obviously had a long day. But it's also tempting fate over here. I hope you appreciate that.
Day. I wouldn't call it a long day. I've had a good day.
Okay. I mean, you still managed to go out in the cold. I guess you were in a press box, so it didn't matter. But I was trying to be respectful, trying to get this thing started. So if the Packers manage to come back and tear my heart apart, it's because I've jinxed it by starting the podcast early.
Makes sense.
Anyways, man, how was Kansas City? How is Kansas City? How was that game?
It was a lot of fun. I got to hang out in the booth with former Chiefs wide receiver Mark Bowichter. So we were having a lot of fun rooting for the Chiefs, obviously, and then met our mutual friend Peter King, Kevin Clark from The Ringer. It was a lot of fun to chat with some people. The game, very much like last week, started out a little slow for Kansas City, but ultimately Patrick Mahomes was too good. And it was a pretty epic thing, man. I did not expect. Well, for one, I didn't really know how people would react if they would have won, but it was like tons of people. Like I had like multiple people in that booth, like crying, giving me random stranger guy that they've only heard on the radio a hug. So it was a lot of fun. And
people were crying after the game.
Dude, people were crying. This dude that
are you serious?
There was a dude that sponsors.
No way.
One of Soren's he owns a local business. He was in there with me and we met, hung out, talked for a while. And like when they sacked Tannehill on that last like fourth down, he was just like, finally. I heard the word finally probably 20 times in like a 5-minute stretch. People were, and you got to understand the Chiefs have lost the AFC title game last year. Last season was the first time they won a home playoff game. They won a home playoff game since 1993. They've only won 4 games I believe 4 games all time in Arrowhead Stadium in the playoffs. This is the first time they made the Super Bowl in 50 years. So you're talking about a fan base that has dealt with a lot. And so there was a decent amount of just elation, which is really interesting.
To me, I obviously don't get this because I'm not from a smaller city, but I think that's part of it. That's got to be part of it, right? Because the Chiefs are that city. Like there's really not. I mean, you got the Royals, right? But come on,
we won a World Series in 2015 and made it in 2014, but no one cares. Not had a lot of success.
Yeah, but no one cares about that. Like that city is the Chiefs, and so I think that plays a huge role in it, right? And that makes a little more sense to me. I will not be crying if the San Francisco 49ers make it to the Super Bowl, even though it'll be, finally just the second time they've made it in my lifetime. The first time being, of course, the Colin Kaepernick-led Niners where the lights went out against the Ravens. But that's cool. I mean, you could tell for Andy Reid that he was like, thank God. Like there was a little part of him that was probably like, man, I wonder if I'll ever make it back, right? Because he obviously deserves to have made multiple Super Bowls, to have won a Super Bowl, and now he's got a really good shot. It looks like they're going to be a slim favorite. We'll talk about that game in a second.
Well, and the other thing is we've seen it in the history of the league, right? Aaron Rodgers, who's in the game today, getting his ass kicked, is
stop it. You better not. If you fucking start acting like this game is over, there are 5 minutes left in this goddamn game.
Dan Marino, like Mahomes, made the Super Bowl. Dan Marino made the Super Bowl in his second NFL season and never made it again. Randy Moss with Minnesota got that team to the NFC Championship game in '98 as a rookie, and they never got into the Super Bowl again. Like there are plenty of generational players in the NFL for whom, they generated a ton of team success early, and then there was it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that they were going to be back and back and back and back, and that never happened. Brett Favre won 1 Super Bowl and lost another one and never made it back. So it's like, if you're Reid, yes. And one of the great things was when Mahomes made that touchdown run today, I kind of was like, God, Mahomes is a Chief for a long, like this, he's the advantage player in the NFL right now. And the Chiefs have him for basically as long as they want to. Right. And that's just like a great,
you just can't help yourself, huh?
If you're a fan of the team,
you are just tempting fate left and right.
Well,
that's the kind of day it's been for you, huh? You just think you're invincible right now.
Well, all I'm saying is, again, these like Reed feeling a sigh of relief for making the Super Bowl, I think is understandable given after making it so close last year, there's no guarantee, right? And the same thing's true about winning it, right? Like if they lose to Green Bay or San Francisco in 2 weeks, like it's gonna be the other side of the coin too, where it's like, okay, now they got to get there and win it, and there's absolutely zero guarantee that that's ever going to happen.
So we're going to talk about that game because there's a ton of layers to that game that I think are very interesting. But I do want to go back to the Titans getting out to a lead to start that game. If we hadn't seen last week where they went down 24-0, I've got to imagine that it would have been a little more tense. Was anyone really that worried? Was there a little bit of like, oh man, here we go again? Or was it like, oh, we got this?
The 10-0 lead was not something I thought people were upset about just because the Chiefs had the ball for 3 plays prior. The one that I think hurt was when the Chiefs, Tennessee drove the ball down and Derrick Henry had a nice little run and then they got called for holding and then it got to 3rd and 20-something.
That stupid PI.
And I'm looking there, I'm like, why are you playing press man? And then Bashaud Breeland got called for pass interference on a pass that was well short of the first down. And then they went ahead and scored a touchdown to an offensive lineman, which is kind of like rubbing it in, all that kind of stuff. That point in time, it was relatively tense. And then Mahomes just went down like it was nothing, scored. And then the drive that you talked about on Twitter, which was run, screen. Like when they went run, screen and then didn't fake the punt, the game was over, in my opinion.
Well, are you looking at my notes right now? I didn't share them with you. That was my note for this game. That was when the game ended. But I wanted.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me.
The thing with the Chiefs, I've compared Mahomes to Steph Curry before. I would compare this Chiefs offense and this Chiefs team to that Warriors team, where you sit there waiting for the Warriors to go down by 20, and then you live bet them because the Warriors being down by 20 is not like any other team being down by 20. I'm not talking about this year's Warriors. I'm talking about peak Warriors, with and without Durant, when those teams were just great, the 73-win Warriors. The Chiefs are like that on offense. They're down 10, they're down 20. You just go live bet them because a model that doesn't look at the strengths of the teams and sees a 20-point deficit is not going to value the Chiefs as they should, right? And I think that's the bigger point here as we look towards the Super Bowl where, look, regardless of which team they play, if that happens in the Super Bowl, like we need to be prepared for it. And I'm sure the markets will be wary of that, but like, I don't know. I still don't think they value them enough. Because when they were down 10, I wasn't fazed at all. Like I didn't think, even when that PI happened, it really didn't worry me in the least. Yeah.
Yeah, the other time that kind of worried me was when Tyreek Hill dropped the pass coming out of the second half, out of the halftime, and but ultimately what ended up happening, and to Tannehill's credit, I think a little bit, he did not take the sacks that he did, at the rate that he normally did early in the game, but then eventually it caught up to him. But Tannehill, I thought, played pretty well, but it was the commitment to the running game that put him in bad yardage situations, and he's not good enough. And we expressed skepticism about the Chiefs defense most of the entire year. And, they were without Juan Thornhill. They were without 2 starting defensive linemen. Chris Jones played, minimal snaps because of injury, and their guys just played. And it was very encouraging to see. The interesting thing to your point about the Warriors, to me, it was such an interesting discussion of how to understand football, because Vrabel totally took that ball with 4 minutes left in the first half and decided to play to take time off the clock and to play field position with the Chiefs. And the Chiefs helped him out because they, gave up a holding penalty on the punt return, almost fumbled the punt. They started at around the 10-yard line. and it didn't matter, right? With the Chiefs, time and space are just not that important of dimensions, right? They'll just, you give them a minimum amount of time, maximum amount of space, and they'll score.
It felt weirdly similar to when Doug Marrone took knees right before the half against the Patriots a couple years ago. And you were like, man, I don't know if you should be doing that. Like, you kind of, you should try and score every time you have the ball, because if you don't, like, you're in trouble. And the fact that they didn't even make an attempt at scoring. It was like, okay, well, if Derrick Henry picks up 10 yards, then we're in good shape. But if not, it's okay, because that's the only reason you go run, screen in that situation. And obviously, they were leading at that point. The next time they scored, it was to cut it to a 2-score game. Like, they got shellacked from that point on. They just had no shot. And I didn't really think Tannehill played that well. In fact, I was watching that kind of every time that he dropped back without play action. I was like, is this really the guy that you want to franchise? I don't know. That's what I kept thinking about, because I assume they're going to franchise him, and he's got a little Bortles in him. I got to be honest with you. I think he really does.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Tannehill played well for Tannehill, right? I mean, he completed over 2/3 of his passes. Still not great yards per attempt. Certainly, fended off a decent amount of pressure, but made throws early in the game. But you're right, a lot of it did come after play action. Funny, Henry didn't run particularly well, but play action worked a decent amount early in the game. But I agree with you. I think that the quarterback position in Tennessee is not sewn up. They certainly have to think about their approach to it, and unfortunately, for them, right, the way that the draft goes now, they're picking in the bottom 4, even though they're a 9-7 team. Whereas before it used to be like your record and then the 2 Super Bowl or whatever it was. So not only do they get this far and it becomes really, really, really apparent that they're not good enough, they also get screwed by getting this far because they don't get to pick until I believe it's 29.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very legitimate question, because the flukiness of their playoff run should be apparent to people. They got lucky to be in the lead. I mean, it's the same story for the Jaguars, right? You're in the lead, all of a sudden you're in a position where you can mask the quarterback's inability to just drop straight back and throw the ball. And then on the flip side, you see the glaring difference when a guy like Mahomes, whose running backs carry the ball 3 times in the first half, it doesn't matter. And it didn't even matter that they weren't able to hit. I took note of this as well. They didn't really have like a huge play, but he was so freaking efficient at every level of the field. It was incredible. His accuracy is nuts. And it's obviously awesome when he scrambles around and makes throws that no one else can make. But the fact that he's also the most consistent quarterback, I just don't think that can be underscored. When you have that level, it's like, okay, when he's in the pocket, he's Drew Brees. And when he's outside of the pocket, he's Russell Wilson, but without the sack issue. Like, it's a crazy combination, right? Because he's so freaking accurate from within the pocket, quick throws, each level of the field, but then also no other quarterback's going to be able to run around for 7 seconds and then launch it with accuracy 50 yards downfield.
And you brought up such a great point, when we faded Tennessee way back against, I believe it was New Orleans, Tennessee can't rush the passer, and their corners are good enough to beat bad receivers, but not good enough to beat a receiving core. And we all laugh at Sammy Watkins, but like, when the 5th best option on your team is Sammy Watkins, you're going to get screwed if you're the opposing defense and you can't get pressure. And that's exactly what happened. And the Chiefs credit, they build an offensive line the way we would. They have 2 high-priced tackles. They have a bunch of nobodies in the middle of the in the middle of offensive line, and it works out great for them because Mahomes can navigate pressure. It's truly fun to see, and it'll be interesting to watch because we're going to be provided the Niners hang on here, we're going to be in a big time does defense matter that much bowl, right? Because the Niners are so much better talent-wise than Tennessee is here. But the question is how much is it going to move the needle against an offense that is basically when is the last time the other team stopped the Chiefs?
It just hasn't happened with a healthy Mahomes in a very long time.
Yeah, because like in this game, Kelsey had a drop on the first possession. Hill had a drop on the first possession of the second half. And there was the time where they were running out the clock, right? I mean, and then in the game against Houston, it was Demarcus Robinson dropped the ball twice, right? So, you know, and obviously San Francisco's, you know, better. But I think a lot of people are going to look at that game and say, you know, well, they're an awful lot better, you know, than any of the defenses, you know, the Chiefs have played. This should make a huge difference. And I categorically reject that.
The Titans, what I don't think can be underscored enough. I just use underscored twice. It's not even that late. I shouldn't be this out of it. But I wrote down.
Your favorite team might go to the Super Bowl. So
I know. It's a little pins and needles right now. I have already checked. I'm not going to lie to you. I've checked the weather in Miami a few times because are
we going to use our one time with Chris?
I don't know.
Chris,
Stop it. It's 16 degrees here in beautiful Cincinnati, and so I had to check the Miami weather report, and it's not 16 degrees in Miami. You'll be shocked to find out. But here's the thing. So what we're learning, what some people are learning, I think we've known this and tried to talk about this, is that the Titans were a fraudulent team, and that we shouldn't forget that. Just like the Seahawks were a fraudulent team, but with Russell Wilson, which makes a big difference.
But the Titans had Henry, and some people would start a team just with him. So I don't know.
The Ringer has a lot of really good people that we really like. You just mentioned Kevin Clark.
Yeah.
We know, as members of Pro Football Focus, of PFF, that sometimes your boss says things that, you know, they don't totally fly with all the things that you've talked about. So I'm going to give them a pass.
Did you see? Check this out. I just looked at the Chiefs' offensive line today. Gave up a combined,
I think it was
three hurries.
Yeah.
Mahomes was credited with a sack allowed and 7 hurries.
Yeah.
So there was 11 total pressures on Mahomes. Like, you know, there are more pressures than some plays. There are more players credited with the pressure, but Mahomes was responsible for 8 of 11 of them.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy in relation to what his offensive line allowed, which what that talks about is the simple fact that the Titans suck. That's one thing, because what Mahomes does is he will wait until the very last second. It's crazy. So he's one of the least frequently sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. I believe under 4% is like tied third or something like that. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't take a lot of hits. He still does, and he takes a lot of pressures. And he's continuously, what you just talked about, at the top of the league in terms of allowing pressure on himself. But the other guys that do that take a crap ton of sacks, and he doesn't, which is, I just think that's so impressive. But he wasn't worried about that Titans defense. Like, that's what that says, right? It's like, oh, you want to come, pressure me? That's fine. I'll wait. I'll deliver this pass with accuracy. And we're taking knees now.
We're taking knees. Baby. Congratulations, George.
Oh, baby, here we go. All right, now we can. So I was trying to stall to talk about this game until it was over.
I can't believe how, like, you're a pretty, like, rational person. I can't believe sometimes how much you believe in jinxes sometimes.
It's not that. So it's not the jinxing. It's the, once I allow myself to acknowledge that something's happened, if it ends up not happening, the pain is too much for me to handle.
Okay.
And you know me, I'm a passionate guy. I try my best not to put myself in situations where my emotions and my passion gets the best of me. So, which is
the lock of the week did hit today, so we now have to give
got to donate a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is always a good feeling. So the lock of the week was teasing the Niners and the Chiefs, which means we'll roll into the Super Bowl with a little donation to the charities.
We did not get Green Bay plus 7.5, so we were not able to get the middle. Finish the week 1-1.
It's tough,
but the Chiefs are really the fulcrum, right? The Chiefs were, if we can win the Chiefs game, and this is like a decent game that the Niners win, it was not a decent game because the Packers were a bunch of yellow-bellied pigs today, but it was good enough to get at least one of two.
Should we talk about this game a little bit now?
Sure. So I was driving back from Arrowhead to my buddy Soren's house while this game was kind of started. It sounded like it started a little slow, but then San Francisco just decided, much like they did against the Vikings, it was going to be the Raheem Mostert train.
It was so beautiful. I mean, the crappy thing about it was they were clearly gonna. This could have been Tevin Coleman with the record,
right?
And the only reason that it was not was that he hurt himself. What appeared to be kind of a crappy injury on his forearm. You made this point. I was re-listening to our podcast from last Monday or last Sunday night, and you brought up, well, did Kyle Shanahan take the ball out of Jimmy G's hands in that game? And I was like, no, he didn't really. It felt to me like they just realized, oh, the Vikings suck. We can beat them without having to put Jimmy G at risk. And I'm kind of going to double down on that. Like there was no reason to fear this Packers team pretty much right from the jump. Like there was nothing about them that scared you. So when you are blowing another team off the ball every time you snap it, and you've got undrafted free agent Raheem Mostert running wild on, basically every time he touches the ball, Raheem Mostert is such a journeyman that you need 2 screenshots. A buddy of mine sent me his Pro Football Reference transactions. You need 2 screenshots to get all of his transactions. He's been in the league since 2015. So like that tells you all you need to know, right? Derrick Henry, unfortunately wasn't even able to be in the game when his team needed to come back. Raheem Mostert, who no one was talking about, I think he was like.
Were my tweets a little too snarky when I was like, the Titans got away from what got them here on the drive and they're down 18 and they didn't run?
I didn't think so. I thought that was on point. I mean, it's hilarious because when the key to victory is someone that you can't have in the game when you most need to score points, that kind of shows you.
Right, it's the Minnesota Vikings with Adrian Peterson.
It's the direction that things go. And the funny thing was Romo got that. Romo figured it out because they were talking about how crazy it was that the Chiefs had more rushing yards than the Titans. Who could have predicted that, I think is what Nance said. And it was like a pause, and then Romo goes, it's really all about who's winning the game. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, they figured it out.
Yeah, so, yeah. He walked himself into it. Hopefully he it's one of those things where he writes it down.
And remembers?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we don't have to listen to the whole this is the key to the game type of thing when
next year when the Titans and the Chiefs are week 1.
I mean the Titans were 8-7 in the regular season. I don't count the Houston game. It's just come on.
So do you think, because I now looking kind of forward, I don't know if there's that much worth talking about this game, honestly. It was just such a non-game from the start, right? Like garbage time started in the second quarter, late in the second quarter, basically.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a scare when Green Bay got it to 14, but the Niners, you never really had. I mean, Mostert had 151 yards today after contact, the last time I checked. 7 missed tackles forced, 8.4 yards per carry, 6, just a shade over 6 yards per carry after contact. I mean, come on. There was no, this is a thing where, interestingly, it's exactly what we said. The Packers ultimately were just not good enough as a football team to go up against the 49ers. And when that happens in college football, when that happens in high school football, when that happens in Pee Wee football, you're just simply a better team that belongs on a different field than another team. What do? You out-physical them, right? And you put your hand out there and you hold their head. And while they swing, you avoid the punches. And that, that happened today. And even though Rodgers, I think, he didn't play great, but he at least gave an effort at the end there. It just wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, the Green Bay Packers, the most fraudulent 14-4 team in the NFL.
Yeah, because the 95 Chiefs lost in the divisional round, so they were 13-4. And I looked back, and I feel to save face a little bit, I said, that's George's opinion and I respect it, but I kind of think the 95 Chiefs are the worst 13-3 team. So I hedged a little bit.
You did.
But 14-4, they are, because not only did they luck box into the bye, but they luck boxed into a team that wanted to win about as much as they did last week.
Right. I mean, they were running
Ugo Amadi at nickel and
Marshawn Lynch, who is actually in worse shape than Eddie Lacy is currently, which is crazy.
Could Ugo Amadi cover you in the Cincinnati Rec League where I'm playing quarterback?
I have a high opinion of my athleticism, but I would hope that Ugo Amadi would do a decent job on me.
Decent, right? But I bet you if I couldn't throw the back shoulder to you, I bet you Bruce could.
That's true. I might get one on him. 1 out of 100.
The Chiefs open at -1, -120 here on this total on the game, 52.5.
Should we just move on to that game? Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it because there's no reason talking about the Packers anymore. We took a lot of crap last week. We were ultimately right about them. So,
look, they have a passionate fan base. I'll just say this. If you don't get excited about football, if you're not passionate about it, then there's something wrong with it. And that's one of the great things about football. It's a low sample sport where people invest their lives in it. And hell, if I lived in Green Bay, I'd certainly invest my life in it too. So it's great that people are passionate about it. I personally do not. I love it when people get fired up. I thought they could have been a little meaner. I got called a clown a lot, and that's sort of not creative. Come at me a little harder.
I have a lot of people who are like, how do you have a job still? Which is a good question. I'm not
super fair. But how do any of us have jobs if you walk around? But okay, so let's move on. So it's 1.5, 1. Now it was 2.5 when we talked about this last week. So not like it's moving through a bunch of key numbers here, but that does. The Niners were impressive in this victory. Were they impressive enough to move it off of what we saw it at last week? My answer would be honestly no. To me, it's just about the Packers were not that good of a team. They just ran the ball all over them, and that's not going to fly against a Chiefs team that can actually score points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. We saw the same thing happen last week. The question is okay, if you look at the look ahead lines and you look at what's going on here, what is the probability what is the probability that it would move the game off the spot so much? And with Minnesota, I do think Minnesota is a team that matches up against some teams in the NFL relatively well, right? And so beating the brakes off them to me is a pretty good thing, right? I mean, I've nagged on the Vikings before, but they're a better team than the Packers, I would say. Beating Green Bay now, we've sort of seen this song and dance before. Is it just the Niners win healthy, win getting a lead, healthy defensively especially, but when getting a lead, are they just this team that can just beat teams that they're clearly better than? Because that's how they were in the early part of the season. They didn't have problems with most of the teams early in the part of the season. It was when they got banged up a little bit and they played teams that had, and this is a slight to Rodgers, but quarterbacks who are pretty good. And when they face a team that's a little weaker than them and the quarterback isn't particularly good, can't take advantage of some of the things that they might struggle with defensively, they step on their heads, right? But does that project too much onto this game 2 weeks from now? Heck yeah, it does, I think. I think the number should not have moved, even if it is, as you said, not through a key number.
Because it's similar to what we talked about with the Ravens, with the Titans to a lesser extent, right? Which is just because you've seen them dominate teams one way does not mean that that's actually a stable way of continually beating up on teams, right? Which is exactly, I think, what you were saying, which is, hey, if you're playing another really good quarterback, you can't just sit back and dominate this other team because that team actually has a chance of continuing to score points, whereas clearly the Packers didn't, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that, truthfully, we probably, in some of the deep learning stuff we do, we'll take this into account, I think, indirectly. But there is something to, I think, matchups in football that is difficult for simple models to, the simplest model to account for, right? The Niners being the fourth best team in ELO versus the sixth best team in ELO is different depending upon who that sixth best team is. And I think that that's something that, as we move forward with things, is something to consider.
I would concur.
Yeah.
So that, I think it's fair to say the total is what, 51.5?
52.5. I see it with a juice towards the over, I believe.
That makes a ton of sense to me. So the Niners defense will certainly be healthier than it was in New Orleans. But that's the game that I would look to and think about what could this game potentially be. Because there's a bunch of very cool matchups in this game. But honestly, the one that I'm most excited for is Kyle Shanahan versus Andy Reid. Now, the funny thing is it's going to be pitched as passing offense versus rushing offense, like which one, matters more, which is hilarious. But what it's really going to be is which guy is going to score the most points. And I don't really, obviously the Niners defense is more talented than the Chiefs defense is, but it's all about how each of those quarterbacks play. And the simple fact is that Pat Mahomes' floor, because of how good he is in structure and how good Andy Reid is at creating that structure, is just so much higher than it is for Jimmy G, because Jimmy G, as much as I like Jimmy G, is going to give, when he has to throw it 40 times, just like with Tannehill, right? You ask Tannehill to throw it 40 times, you're going to have some mistakes. And the same thing is true of Jimmy G. And so it'll be interesting to see, what matters more, the scheme that Shanahan is able to put together or whether or not Jimmy G makes a mistake.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that the Chiefs have done that's been especially good, and we saw it today, and the question is can it continue? Because the Niners are pretty, replete with talent in the, on the skill positions, especially Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. But the Chiefs have done a great job of holding the point of attack in the run game. Like they a season ago, they were very much a rush up the field team and tackle the guy on the way. And Chris Jones is getting 20 sacks but they've made a concerted effort of putting folks like Mike Pennell and Kylan Saunders, Xavier Williams, players like that in the middle of the defense. And they don't get as big of a push up the middle on early downs in the passing game, but they do a good job of being physical in the run game. And so, the Niners just bullied the Packers today. And they're not a terrible front seven, but I could see in a situation where the Chiefs sell out and make Garoppolo beat them, which we would generally say is a bad tactic. But Garoppolo right now, there are a lot of question marks about him.
Well, and especially because he's thrown 20 passes in the last two games.
It was Tannehill right? I mean, Tannehill had a similar, volume the first two playoff games that he played.
The difference to me is that Tannehill has a long history of being garbage, and I don't have that same history for Jimmy G. In fact,
and the receivers for the
are way better.
The surrounding players for the Niners are a lot better than the Titans
and the coaches. People were just having way too much of a coronation both for Derrick Henry and the son of the founder of FedEx or whoever it is that calls the plays for the Tennessee Titans.
Arthur Smith, who sounds like an economist at the
and
one of the institutes.
So it was interesting. Someone was talking about this, isn't that cool that he, was willing to make $20K a year to stop. Let me finish my thought. Don't make my point for me. I've been working on this all day. They were like, wasn't it cool that he took $20K a year to take the long road, the long path offensive coordinator? And the answer is, on the flip side, he was able to take $20K a year because of the financial situation that he had. Let's not get it totally twisted. Now, it's great that he's worked hard and gotten this far and all of that, but don't twist I'm the son of a billionaire into this great accomplishment.
Well, that's the thing. And some people need to hear this, right? Some people need to hear this about none of us are saying that Kyle Shanahan doesn't deserve the job he has. None of us are saying Joe Buck doesn't deserve the job he has. They're great. They're awesome. Bill Gates deserves the life he has. But the fact of the matter is, Bill Gates grew up in a time and a place where he was one of the few kids that could code as a teenager for nonstop, right? And so he's got to put in that work. Kyle Shanahan's got to put in that work. Steve Belichick's got to put in that work, but they have access to the ability to work hard, and Malcolm Gladwell their way to those heights, right?
Right.
Like, so we're not saying they're bad. What we're saying is the reason why they end up being the best candidates is because they get the training, right? And some folks don't get the training, and it's hidden from us. Like when Scott Turner becomes the offensive coordinator, right, for I can't remember which team it is. It's not because they gave him the offensive coordinator job. That was his first job in the NFL. No, they gave him the $30,000 a year, quality control coach 10 years ago. And like, as opposed to somebody else who, has no connections. And then 10 years later, yes, he's qualified and worthy of that job. But let's not forget how he started, right? And to your point about the finances, like as somebody who went to grad school because my family had means, it's 100% easier to do it when you know that if you fail, you're still not going to be on the street. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. People need to hear it. Like, it's not that I didn't work hard or I don't deserve the job I have now, but I'd be stupid to say that like it was all me or I didn't have special access that other people had, like it's real. And that's the thing. Like those stories kind of highlight certain things and why certain things are the way they are. But nonetheless, it was an interesting discussion we all had this week. Hopefully, we'll start seeing a few more diverse voices in the NFL.
I don't want to get down this rabbit hole, but it's the flip side of it is that Aaron Hernandez documentary, which is, let's talk about all of the circumstances that caused him to murder all these people. It's like, wait, hold on. Take a step back. Dude shot people.
Yeah.
Can we relax with the circumstances being the reason? I get
And aren't you a little bit nervous that the NFL or whomever put the whole did the shock and awe with his supposed homosexuality to get us away from the shock and awe of his CTE? Do you think that was kind of a purposeful thing?
Interesting.
Our minds are on his relationship with fellow players because that came first in the documentary. And quite frankly, it probably is shocking to more people than brain damage is, right? And then brain damage came in afterwards, but we were already so wait a sec, this doesn't make a whole lot. You know what I mean? We're all still wondering about the whole relationship with the high school quarterback thing that we didn't. We were not really thinking about the fact he had a brain of a 70-year-old by the time he shot him. By the time he killed himself.
I think you're taking it too far with their connivingness. Plus, I don't believe the NFL made that documentary.
Sure.
So I don't.
I also was kind of wondering what Ryan O'Callahan, which he had a great story, but he was never teammates with Hernandez.
They never played with him.
He never killed anybody.
They forced that way. I'm saying, the documentary forced way too much of the circumstance.
Documentary had a lot of first and 10 and second and 10 runs. Let's just put it that way.
Anyways, we got off track there quickly. So obviously, if you just think about this game from the kind of 10,000 foot view, it comes down to this in my opinion. Can Kyle Shanahan be that much better of an offensive coach and decision maker to make up for the difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and Pat Mahomes? And obviously there's a talent discrepancy on the defensive side, which means that if Mahomes plays bad, it might get exacerbated because of the talent that they have there. But really, to me, that's the game.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. And on the other side of the coin, there's only so much Jimmy G can do, right? In terms of he's not so let's say Robert Saleh puts together a brilliant game plan, right? He could absolutely whiff at what the Chiefs have in store for him, right? Not because he's stupid or not because he, doesn't understand football, but just because Andy Reid can do so much with Mahomes, right? The Niners are a little bit more confined, right? I think Shanahan's every bit as good of a football brain as Andy. He's every bit as good of the football brain that Kyle Shanahan is, or sorry, as Andy Reid is, but he doesn't have that ace in the hole the way that Reid does.
He also doesn't have. I mean, the Chiefs have these guys that are. It's interesting that the Niners have like these incredible speedsters at running back, but the Chiefs have them at wide receiver, which is a huge advantage, especially in a game where you'd figure the Niners probably can't throw the ball 8 times with Jimmy G and hope to come out victorious in that game. So I would expect the Niners to do what they've done a lot of times to open up the game, which is to come out and have a great couple of drives because their scripted plays are on point. In other words, they're going to leverage motion. And this stuck out to me about the Chiefs in this win. So the Titans are a fraudulent team. I use this word a lot, but like they really were. I don't think they were better than the Ravens. Yeah. They had played multiple road games at this point. They'd had to win, obviously at the end of the regular season to get into the spot, so they were a little road weary. The Chiefs are not super disciplined, right? Like that game probably shouldn't have been as close, but because of a senseless PI, Chris Jones jumping like 15 times right into the backfield, the Niners are going to take advantage of that with their motions, with all the things that they do offensively to put them in a position where they're out of, it'll make their playmakers look a little faster because they'll be wide open. And then all of a sudden it becomes kind of a track meet. And so if I'm looking at this game right now, the two things I would take the Chiefs -1.5, but I would also take the over 52 in a game where the weather should be perfectly fine in Miami. Right?
Yeah.
I mean that's something.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only issue, but we've seen this all year. The only issue with the 49ers is the percentage of games where they get up, and their defense is as suffocating as everybody thinks. They're not the type of team. I mean, tonight they were kind of, but they're not the type of team to hang 50 on another team, right? And so you have to count on Mahomes and company to do their thing. I think they will, but that's always the downside. But I do agree. I think like you look at the way the Chiefs game played out today, like they played a pretty good game defensively, in my opinion. Still gave up 24, right? And that's kind of the recipe. They'll probably play a pretty decent defensive game in the Super Bowl, and they could still give up 30 just by virtue of who their opponent is.
When you look at, so the offensive matchup is interesting. Is there something that we're overlooking because we are simpletons who only think about offense that has a chance more to make this game a little, throw like a wrench into it, right? We're thinking about this track meet, all these things happen. Who are a couple players or strategies that you think might show up after 2 weeks?
Well, here's one thing. Both kickers are terrific. And so when the game is played in nice weather generally. So what I do think we'll see a frustrating 4th and 1 or a couple of them turn into 3-pointers.
That would be unfortunate.
You know what I'm saying? That's a right, because
wasn't it
good
interesting?
Kicker is a clutch.
So the sequence of 4th and 2s in that Chiefs Titans game was interesting because the Titans went for a 4th and 2 and got it, led to a touchdown early in that game. It was a great decision by Vrabel. And then the Chiefs had the same sort of situation. And I'm not sure if those situations happened in reverse chronologically, that the same things happen. Like, I think there's a decent shot that if the Titans hadn't already gone for a 4th and 2 and scored, that Andy Reid kicks there. Mm-hmm. And the simple fact is that he kind of had to do it because the opposing coach had already made that decision and, scored on it. Right. So, it'll be interesting to see how that manifests itself in this game, because I think Shanahan, in a role as an underdog, and he certainly is going to put the pedal to the metal. And here's the really interesting thing about this game. You talked about Kansas City fans crying. This game means a fucking ton to Kansas City, to Andy Reid, and the players know it. The 49ers are young. they're don't, you know, aside from like Richard Sherman, who's already won a Super Bowl, you know, there's not a lot of guys on there that can sit there and say like, hey, these opportunities don't come around this often. Like, there's not a lot of players that really understand that. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that impacts these teams when they actually go out there and play.
Because I sort of see it the exact opposite.
Okay.
And humor me for a second. So, yes, I do agree that the Chiefs have been probably the league's best team for the last 2 years. And so to come out of that without a Super Bowl win is probably going to cause the team a little bit of desperation, right?
Yep.
But I also think, and again, I don't mean to disparage the 49ers. I've said it a ton of times.
No, please.
Team,
disparage away.
But there have been a couple Super Bowls where I thought to myself, I really hope this team wins because I don't think they'll get back. The Kurt Warner Cardinals. I'm trying to think of another team. But kind of like the 2015 Broncos. You know, teams like that where, you know, I think Jimmy G's good and I think he'll be the quarterback of the Niners for a while. But a lot has gone right for the Niners this year in terms of, you know, the players they needed to stay healthy stayed healthy. Jimmy G, chief among them. Their offensive coordinator, the head coach, ran a scheme that the league hadn't figured out yet. Defense did great, and they, you know, they ran good, and that's awesome. But if I'm thinking, okay, is Jimmy G a year after year after year Super Bowl quarterback? I'm not saying he's not, and I don't want to say no, but I do know that Mahomes is, you know what I mean? And so if I'm looking at this from the Niners perspective, if I'm a Niners fan, I'm kind of thinking to myself, God, I hope we win this one because I'm not sure if it's gonna be this easy again, right? That's kind of how I see it.
So you are assuming way too much like intelligence or I don't know what the right word is here.
Sure. Guilty, yes.
Of the 49ers. Like, there's no way they're thinking that way. However, I do think there's an element of Kyle Shanahan's young, but he has been to a Super Bowl and blown it. And I think that's the one potentially equalizing factor here is that Kyle Shanahan is a really good coach for two reasons. One, he's a great schemer of offense. But number two, he gets you fired the fuck up. And I use the F word there on purpose because this guy curses.
Do you listen to Lil Wayne?
He curses more than any human being that I have.
Besides you.
I don't even curse that much. I mean, he literally just puts him in there every other word. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the team believes in him, right? And he clearly commands that room and has created a really strong culture there. Probably not too dissimilar from the reverence that Mahomes and the rest of the Chiefs show for Andy Reid. And it's been obvious for the past couple of seasons, right? They love that guy. They would do anything for that guy. And so
what you're trying to say is this is the best matchup. This is we asked the football gods for a great matchup, and by golly, we got it.
We got it because I do think there's an element. Last year we had the Rams who didn't understand the moment. They were not prepared for the moment. And I don't think we're going to get this here. I think we're going to get two teams that desperately want to win this game and understand the urgency and the importance. And that's going to be a part of their process going into it. And that means they're going to come out prepared. Offensively, they're going to be on point. I cannot wait. I honestly, if you at the beginning of the season said, hey, this is the way it's going to happen, there's no fucking way. There's no chance. The NFL's not going to get this lucky for the 100th season, but they did. I couldn't be more excited. Hey, here's a question for you.
It's great. I mean, I'm pumped because this is not only from a betting perspective going to be an interesting game, but the props.
Oh, they're going to be fascinating. I mean,
because you know, I bet a couple of Henry unders today, and because I was just like, his total rushing yards on one of the books was 110 and a half. It's outrageous.
Ridiculous.
None of these and like just by game flow alone, he had 65 yards in the middle of the second quarter. It would look like a goner, but by the time the game got out of hand, he never touched the ball again in the run game. And it's like the question, like, how do you back and forth all this? Like, like Raheem Mostert at over 200 yards. What's his number going to be, right? Tevin Coleman's probably out for the year, right? So what is Matt Breida's number going to be? What's Kittle's number going to be? Like all that kind of stuff, and like how we sort of think about the matchups and who does Matthew cover and who does, do the Chiefs.
What do they
shadow?
do with Sherman?
Yeah, what do they do with Sherman, right? Because Soren was talking, we were watching the second game here. Sherman's brilliant, but he's slow now, right? So is he going to cover Tyreek Hill? Probably
you better
not.
Watch yourself. Well, the Niners team, and here's the thing that's important. We saw this with the Packers defense. The Packers defense just didn't even know what they were doing, right? Like they were just getting blown, this way and that way. The Niners defensive scheme, and this is why we talk about the defensive coordinator being that 12th guy in the field. They are disciplined and they're in the right position, and they do a lot of things team-wise that are efficient. And that's one of the reasons why they're the only team, I believe they've given up 10 completions, 20-plus yards downfield all season, which is like 6 better than the next closest team. And obviously the Chiefs do strike, they hit the long ball as well as anyone else. However, I think that something like that type of stat will get thrown out there, and people will overreact to it for 2 reasons. The first is, well, the Niners never played the Chiefs. So like, relax. They've never played a team that's that good at orchestrating offense. But secondarily, we saw today that the Chiefs don't need to do that to win. Mahomes will carve you up at all levels. They're not sitting there just waiting for the deep ball. Yeah, they're going to take deep shots and they're going to compromise your guys on the back end, but they're also going to carve up the intermediate, the short stuff, and they're going to be efficient enough there to win that way if you try and take away the deep pass. So it's going to be fascinating.
Last week, Kelsey had 13 targets, 10 catches, 3 touchdowns. Today's game, he had 4 targets, 3 catches, 30 yards. Last week, Hill only had 4 targets. This week, he had 7, caught 5 for 67, 2 touchdowns. And it ends up being Sammy effing Watkins, who catches 7 of 10 balls, 114 yards, I believe his first touchdown since he scored a couple in week 1. So, like, you look at that and you're just like, you look at, like, the prop structure. And actually, there were a couple, Demarcus Robinson's over and Watkins over. I think they were combined like 60 yards. Right. And you're thinking the time, and then Mecole Hardman was like another like 15 or something. He had 8 yards on 1 catch. So you're like looking at those secondary receivers. It's going to be so interesting to try to guess and check about what Reed's going to do with those guys. And then you look at the Niners, and when you think about using a data-driven approach to try to handicap the game, how the heck do you do it when the Niners haven't thrown the football in 2 straight games, right? Really. So you look at their receivers and, what Manuel Sanders has done nothing in the playoffs, and that doesn't mean he's played poorly. They haven't needed to use him, right? It's just such an interesting dynamic because, the game is going to probably unfold for the Niners in ways that it hasn't this year in many cases.
I will be taking the Emmanuel Sanders over on receiving yards.
No matter what it is.
I can just tell you that right now. I mean, it was funny. I was on our good friends at the Daily Line on Friday, and we were doing like most rushing yards, most receiving yards, whatever. And the favorites for most rushing yards obviously was Henry. And I was like, I'm fading this all day long. I would take someone like Mostert.
Awesome.
Like, why would you not? Right. But that's the beauty of running the football, right? It's like, it doesn't matter who the public thinks has been great recently. It's all about game script and game flow, right? And that's what happened with Raheem Mostert. But then on the other side with receivers, it's so much about what have you seen lately. Like Devontae Adams was the betting favorite to have the most receiving yards today. And it's like, okay, I can see that because they're going to be down, but also you're overreacting so much to what you saw 1 week ago. Now, 2 weeks ago, Go ahead.
He got it though. I mean, like at the very end. That's how tough these things are because Watkins was really the best receiver today, but Adams gets the yardage based upon a deep ball at the end of this stupid little game, right?
Exactly, which is why, and we won't have that situation here where there's not like a big underdog, right?
Right.
But we will. I wonder if people will overreact to the Sammy Watkins, epiphany. that happened. What, he's had 2 big games, week 1 and week 20.
And Sammy Watkins has played 2 career AFC Championship games as a member of the Chiefs and has gone over 100 yards in both of them.
So next year we got to
take that, Josh.
Here's my favorite trend that was broken today.
The over 6 yards?
Yeah, the Titans were undefeated against teams that averaged over 6 yards per play.
I mean, we've made our fair share of gambling blunders in the past, so I was going to be the last person to try to drag Clay Travis. But that one was really funny because
he doesn't need us to drag him.
There was so many setups well, if only the Chiefs were, if only the Chiefs, had averaged 5.5 yards a play, we would have known not to make this bet or something,
No, it's it.
I wonder, this is about growing as a person in this space, but I wonder if he was peacocking at all when they were up 10. I don't follow him or anything, but that would have been the faux pas number 2.
I can tell you, I was not peacocking at any time during any of these games whatsoever.
Yeah.
So if I said, I'm assuming you're with me in terms of taking the Chiefs -1.5.
On first blush for sure.
Taking the Chiefs -1.5 to me seems like a pretty solid value. I mean, just in the Super Bowl, you're getting the best quarterback in the NFL. I mean, we've talked about this for a while, right? Like, going into the playoffs, Mahomes is the guy you want.
Can I tell you about another bet I like?
You took Jimmy G last, is my only point that I was going to make there. What other bets do you like?
Now
is this some first quarter bullshit?
No, and can I tell you, Jimmy G, I had never said I'd take the Niners last, right?
Right. No, but I'm just making a global point about you have the best quarterback left in the tournament against what was, at one point the guy that you would take last, and the better one is only favored by 1.5.
Correct. Yeah. The Chiefs team total is 27.
Okay. That's good. That's solid.
I'm just throwing that out there. We, on the 2-minute drill, when you were gone, we all had our best bets. I thought it was a little bit I didn't like Packers 7.5, even though, Greenline kind of liked it. So I said Chiefs over 30.5 total, team total.
Yeah, I like that.
I feel like that was there are some good ones. Honestly, when we talk about, next week we talk about, there's actually some great props. Today, today the Titans to score in the first quarter was just -160. So it's if they lay that number at all with the Titans, with the 49ers in the Super Bowl, you better bet that that's going to be a bet.
Wow.
Given how fast
that really rolled off the tongue. So 27. The only apprehension I have there is exactly what you talked about earlier, which is in this big moment, both of these guys have been conservative before, Shanahan and Reed. And boy, would it pain you to see them kicking field goals left and right.
Oh, my goodness.
Boy, would it. And as I was hearing you say that, the reason I was silent on the other end was like, you want to tempt fate like that, huh, buddy?
I mean, yeah.
You want to be sitting there being like, fuck, please go for this 4th and 1.
The only thing that
out comes Harrison Butker
was that their kickers were so garbage this year that they literally, they went for that 4th down that they went for in, what was it, drive number 2?
Yeah.
Right? It was 4th and 2 or 3 at the Chiefs 29. They went for it because they didn't trust their kicker to make a 46-yard field goal. That was 100%. It wasn't we trust no, it was our kicker cannot make this kick.
Bad kickers help teams win.
Yeah, bad kickers help teams win.
Anything else that we should talk about with this game right now?
No, like I said, this has been a lot of fun. Honestly,
let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. It's your team versus my team. What are we putting on this game?
Okay. And I'll give you the point. So I'll go Chiefs -1.
Get a 1.5. Thank you.
I'll give you a 1.5.
You're such a sweetheart.
I mean, it's like a state is is like a steak dinner?
Well, here's what I was
Vegas
thinking.
flight tickets?
So here's what I was thinking about. Like, you could pick something that's humiliating for the other person, or you could pick something that's like enjoyable for both. So,
because here's the thing. I don't know, other than actually going to the game and sitting next to each other, I don't even know, like, how much are you going to enjoy rooting? Like, because I don't think if I was sitting next to you watching this game that I would root for the Chiefs. Like, I mean, I root for them in my mind, but I would not, like, I'm not going to stand up and go Jason Garrett every time they score.
Right.
Like,
well, that would be particularly awful.
So, like, if my favorite team beats your favorite team, I don't want to put like salt on the wound. I'd rather, like, you get a consolation prize out of it, which is like to,
So that's a very interesting point, and I was going to echo the same thing, which is I would legitimately be stoked for you.
Same.
If the Chiefs win, like, that would be awesome. Now, it helps that it's the Chiefs.
And conversely for me.
So I don't know. Yeah, so it's a really good question. I don't know it definitely makes sense to have the person that loses get to participate in the losing of the bet in a joyful way.
Yes.
I think that is fair. So we'll workshop it, and on Thursday we'll figure it out.
There will be some sort of bet. I think we basically broke even. Maybe you were a game ahead of me in guesses in the playoffs. We stopped keeping track after the first week.
It's all your fault.
But it was a fun playoffs. We did not, it was a little frustrating at times with some of the other games, but ultimately the end result was great.
I'll happily sacrifice all of those little hiccups along the way to get this Super Bowl, because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
I have, let's close out here with a little confession. I have a good story for you.
Okay.
And do you have any good stories for me from your weekend?
Other than, well, here's the thing. Here's a good story.
Oh,
here's a good confession. So I was sitting on the air. So I took a flight from Cincinnati to my hometown of Minneapolis, and then in Minneapolis to Kansas City. On the Minneapolis to Kansas City flight, it was pretty booked. And there were two gentlemen who were sitting next to each other, and it was not going to work.
Okay.
And
structurally, you're saying?
Structurally, yes. And so I thought to myself, I was going to text you because I knew you were going to roll on the ground laughing. So I was going to text you, and I was going to say, it's a belt extension type flight. And before I did, I thought to myself, I thought I was like tempting fate.
You were?
Right? Us analytical people. And I want the Chiefs to win so badly on Sunday. And so I did not send the text, even though there were like three people who literally in unison asked for a belt extender in the same row as me. And me, like, granted, I think I'm a little overweight. I should probably be thinner for sure. I've lost a little bit of weight recently, but I should be thinner.
Shouldn't we all?
But I do fit in the seat.
Here's the good news. You've got 7.2 days
to go to Miami
to get yourself in shape. I already told Steve Palazzolo that he can join in on my patented 6 pack abs in 6 days plan.
Man,
but you've got to be ready to go.
That's how much that game today meant to me. I'm never one to pass up a good joke.
No, you're not.
I'm never.
You can't help yourself.
A 3-pointer in transition. I'm never one to pass up a good joke, but I did in Chiefs Kingdom. You're welcome.
Heck, I even thought there was a good chance that, like, in the middle of the third quarter, you were gonna have a tweet thread about Aaron Snagler, whatever his name is.
No, see, here's the thing with Nagler. And hey, Ayers, you can cut this out. You can cut
Ayers
this out.
Isn't even here. He's still in Vegas.
Right, but Ayers, you can cut this out and tweet it if you want. The thing with the Aaron Nagler thing is you say what you're going to say, and then you don't pound. You just, because let's put it this way: you be the better person in this situation. So, hey, Aaron, we're happy you guys won a playoff game. So. No, but
are you actually wasting some of your
snarky tweets about Derek about the run game, but none of them were personal.
Good. I'm glad you kept the personal stuff out of it. I have a story for you. I'm out to dinner in Washington, D.C., and I'm at a place where The food was really good the first time I went, but the service was a little sketchy. But it was a new place, so my girlfriend and I were like, we like the food so much, we're going to go back. We're going to hope that it was just like them working out the serving situation. They'll figure it out. Basically, like, we got a bunch of things that we didn't actually order. It took a little while for them to kind of figure it out. Anyways, we go back, kind of nervous, that it's going to be another kind of disastrous situation. Get a great waitress. She's awesome. Everything is on time. Food is, again, wonderful. Perfect, right? Meal's over. I had lost a bet, ironically, earlier in the day, so I had to pay the whole thing. So I pay. We actually sat there and talked for a little while after paying. So, maybe 15 minutes after paying, just because we were one of the last seatings. And that's important because, so about 15 minutes after paying, we get up to leave. Order an Uber, wait about 5 minutes at the door for the Uber. As I am walking out the door, our waitress comes running up to me and says, "I'm so sorry. I really apologize. I left 3 glasses of wine off your bill." And I'm like, I'm literally about to walk out the door. And I'm just silent. I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then I realized that she's expecting me to go back into my wallet and pay her for these 3 glasses of wine. So I'm like, "Oh, shit, okay." And my girlfriend is just like praying, I'm sure, that I don't lose my fucking mind. But I'm like, I feel really bad because this woman has been a great waitress, and I tipped her accordingly. I gave a very generous tip. So I pull out the credit card. I pay for these 3 glasses of wine. And I'm curious as to your take on this, because if I were the waiter or waitress in this situation, I would
eat it. You eat it.
I would literally take those. I would take those glasses of wine out of my paycheck. Now, her tip could have more than covered them, and I was flabbergasted that this happened. So I hope you're on my side here, because I was pissed.
No, you eat it. I mean, and here's the thing: there's 2 sides to this. If somebody comes up to you and does what they did, you pay it.
Right.
And this is a bit, again, back to the whole, don't punch down in the world. That person could be having a bad day. That person could be having a bad week, month, year, all that kind of stuff. They could be paying for a funeral. They could be all that kind of stuff. So you pay it, right? If they come up to you, there's it was not good form on her part, but we just don't know her circumstances, right? I get that.
Well,
but if it's me,
I mean, she's working on a Friday night. It's not like we don't, it's not.
If it's me, I eat it.
So now it's been 2 times going to this restaurant. The food's been awesome, and something semi-ridiculous and unforgivable has happened.
Isn't it a sliding scale, though? Doesn't it, just work that way?
I mean, I'll tell you what, I won't be back there next time I'm in D.C., I'll tell you that.
I mean, at Skyline Chili, you get crap food and crap service, I guess.
Skyline?
I guess you could get you're kind of at one corner of the XY, one of the quadrants. But, but usually, I mean, they're kind of a sliding scale. If you have great food, you don't always get great service. And if you have great service, sometimes it's to make up for bad food.
You eat at the wrong places.
But yeah, I mean,
there's a new Skyline commercial out right now with a person that claims
first down runs.
Yeah, there's a person that is the main character in the way too long commercial who claims that they're a picky eater, and and eventually their friend convinces them to eat it, and it's wonderful, and it's like a 1.5-minute commercial. Anyways, that's how we should end our show. The first of probably 4 Super Bowl podcasts that we're going to have.
Yeah. And like this person's intestines, hopefully his podcast blows up.
Jesus Christ. We should really cut that part. That's your worst joke of the day, which I'm glad you saved for minute 69 of the podcast. We'll be back on Thursday, and we're also going to be doing some cool content from Miami Super Bowl week. So you'll want to make sure you stay tuned for that. Anyways, thanks, guys. Go Niners and Chiefs.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.